Feet. Oh, yay, feet. I don't know that many people like to talk about feet or think about feet. Some people get grossed out by feet, but we are going to talk about feet this evening and today because all month my content is really focused on people who are just starting out with yoga, just starting to flirt with yoga, or even just in the consideration stage of a yoga practice, or even those who've just gotten started and they like it but are wanting to learn a little bit more. And also, talking about my beginner's course for anybody that wants to know even more. But feet, I thought, would be a great thing to talk about because a lot of times, in any time that we start something new, we have expectations about what we think it will be like, or how we'll feel, or what things might happen, what might be sore. And for the most part, I'm pretty confident I've never had somebody anticipate that their feet would notice they were starting yoga more than maybe any other part of their body. That it usually catches people off guard how much your feet respond and how much of a workout yoga is for your feet. And I think it does make some sense when we actually walk through it, but it's just one of those things that I don't think you'll naturally think of when you think about, I'm going to start yoga. We might think about, oh, I'm going to stretch a lot. I'm going to feel stiff. I might be a little bit sore in some areas that I haven't, stretched in a while. I might be a little tired. Maybe I'll work up a sweat, but I just don't think we ever really anticipate fully how it's going to feel for our feet. So, a couple of things to think about as you start your yoga practice, things to expect, maybe some reasoning as to why that's happening, and also what you can do about it. So, we practice yoga barefoot, and I think that is sort of the first big reason why you're going to notice your practice in your feet. Because most of the time during the day, we have our feet kind of squished into our shoes. And even supportive shoes are still shoes, right? They're holding our foot in a specific position. And so then you come to yoga practice and you are barefoot. And so your feet are fully connected to the mat. And we spend quite a bit of time during yoga kind of grounding down and thinking about our feet and rooting them to our mat and to the earth. And I don't think many people do that during the day unless they're in yoga or they are practicing their yoga during their day. And so already we're seeing that a yoga practice has a lot of focus on the feet. They are what connect us and ground us to our mat and to the earth beneath. And so as we root down, we're trying to really connect as much of our foot to our mat as possible. And so that is often going to work to eventually spread your toes. And so any of you who were like me and took dance as a child, I did Toshu ballet as well. So when I first started yoga practice all those years ago, my toes were really packed together. And my little toe kind of used to hide behind my other toes. And now and there's space, and it's easier for me to do that without forcing them to do that because they're getting stronger and they're getting more stretched out. And when we think about balance specifically, we work on balance a lot in our yoga practices. And often in yoga, we'll talk about, okay, in balance, we're going to ground down, grow your roots, or connect your foot. And we'll talk about that each foot has the four corners of the foot. And so you can try this right now. In fact, if you're seated or if you're standing, think about your heel, and each side of the heel has a corner. And so I always like to start with the corners. I'm going to do it here as I talk you through it. So I think about those corners of the heel connecting each side. And then I want you to pull your toes up towards your shins and feel that ball behind the big toe, and then that little ball behind the little toe. Those are your other two corners of your feet. Those are what we want to ground down, not using our toes. And a lot of times I think when we start with balance, a lot of us struggle with our balance. It's why we practice it. But we want to anchor here with those four corners that you're feeling. And if you pull those toes up, you can really feel those front two corners. We don't want to scrunch the toes and try to grab the ground with our toes, because if you do that right now, if you kind of crunch your toes and you feel what happens to those front two corners of your foot, they lose a lot of their connection to the mat and to the earth. So instead, we want to ground down in those four corners rather than scrunching our toes to try to stay balanced. Additionally, what you can experience and might find, and this is not just for people starting out. In fact, today, I think somehow my body knew when I posted I was going to go live today to talk about feet. In my yoga practices today, my feet were kind of threatening to cramp, right? That kind of feeling of like, I don't really like this. So a lot of times, no matter how experienced you are at yoga, there's going to be certain days where your feet aren't going to like it as much, or they might be a little grumpy. Maybe you need a little more potassium, right? It's a good sign. But especially people who are starting out in yoga, they might notice that their feet are wanting to cramp. First of all, I just want you to know it's very normal and very common that that happens. And think about like child's pose, and a lot of those poses, we have the tops of our feet against the ground. That's the way they're cued. Well, how often are you putting weight on the tops of your feet during the day? We're not, for the most part, right? We are putting it on the bottoms of our feet, all of our weight. And so it's a new position and a new experience for your feet and your body. And so it makes sense then that they might respond in a specific way, right? And they may not be comfortable in that pose. So if your feet are not comfortable, or if you are in one of those poses and you can tell that they're threatening to cramp, you can tuck your toes underneath. So instead of laying your feet flat with the toes nice and flat as well, you can tuck those toes under, and usually that will make a big difference in your feet being happier. And then you can, continue rather than trying to push through something and it getting into a full-blown cramp, which is no fun ever. Nobody enjoys a foot cramp. So always keep that in mind too, that if your feet are unhappy, you can always tuck the toes. Sometimes as well, that if your feet are parallel to the edges of the mat in things like Warrior Two or Star, sometimes my feet will be unhappy with that too. You can always turn the toes in a little bit instead of keeping the foot completely parallel to the back of the mat, and that can help a little bit as well. But don't be afraid to kind of make those adjustments, or to ask your instructor, hey, this is happening, or this is happening somewhat consistently. This pose isn't very comfortable. Someone who has like a 200 or 500 hour training in teaching yoga should be able to give you some pointers on how to adjust that pose so that you can be more comfortable. And like most things, again, your feet can always be grumpy. Everything can be grumpy, right? That's seemingly how the body works. But a lot of times, as you progress, your feet will get used to it. They'll get stronger, they'll get stretched as well. And you'll notice you're not adjusting for that foot cramp as much as you maybe were at the beginning. And so it's very common, but also a lot of times it's not a forever thing, or it will come and go. Like I said, today my feet were kind of unhappy, so maybe I need to eat a banana before I go to bed. Um, and right, like Julie is commenting here that her feet look different. A lot of times people will talk about that their feet kind of widen out, and if you think about like the toes kind of separating, that kind of makes sense, right? But don't let that worry you. It's more connection, right? And it'll improve your balance, and it'll feel good. So again, hopefully talking about feet maybe isn't on everybody's to-do list, but hopefully that gives you a little bit of a sense of maybe what to expect if you are thinking about giving yoga a try. I obviously think that you should give it a try. Also, if you're thinking about giving it a try, but you really like knowing these types of tips and want to start really safely and with proper alignment, I do have a whole beginner's course. It's online, self-paced, where I walk through the poses and how to do things safely so that you can build a really strong foundation so that you can go into studio classes super confident. So if you're interested in that, I hope you'll check it out. I'm putting the address here up on the screen. You can just go to bit.ly/beginningyoga and always reach out. You can message me or email me, yogawithtg@gmail.com. I'm happy to answer questions, anything that you're worried about or that's keeping you from trying. If an online course makes you uncomfortable, private sessions in person can be a great way as well to kind of build a foundation and be able to ask questions one-on-one. So I hope you have a great one, and hopefully I'll see a few of you in the course, and we'll talk all about more things yoga related.